Welcome back. I hope you're enjoying these episodes so far. This one is going to be a very interesting one. It's going to be challenging. You're probably going to reflect a little bit. You might say, nah, she's nuts. But in this episode, we're going to talk about burnout, the stages of burnout, the reasons why, and it's not what you think. So let's jump right into it. Let me ask you something. How often do you feel like your cup is empty? And when I mean by cup, I mean your emotional cup. I don't think many of you even realize why your cup is empty. Or there is a great misconception about why our cup is empty. And you might actually know why your cup is empty. So if you do, forgive me and then just skip to the next episode. But I actually realized that just a couple of years ago, when again I was in the middle of a workshop and we had this great conversation with the audience. And right then and then in the middle of it, I realized why our cup is empty most often than not, especially if you've been doing this work for a long time. So I think there's two major reasons, and we're going to talk about it. One, which is not obvious, and it's not in any textbooks or any stuff that I read online, is because we are constantly giving and we're not taking anything. And we'll talk about that later. Just take a deep breath. But the other one is because we do not ask for help when we need it. I am so bad at it, and we all are, and no amount of therapy session will change that inside of me. I don't know about you guys, and I'm not trying to encourage unhealthy behaviors or whatever, but I don't know how many times people told me, you gotta be able to ask for help. But that's not who I am. The helper does not ask for help. So I'm going to talk to you guys about what I figured it out. I hope it helps, maybe not. But I think it was certainly worth your time to listen to it. Before we dive into the stages of burnout, what does that look like? What does that feel like? What can you do about it? Way before that conversation, we actually have to talk about you for a second. Are you feeling uncomfortable yet? So the reason we're talking about this because you are a helper and this is your calling and this is who you are. And you don't want to stop this work just because you burned out. So that is why we're going to have this conversation. So let's talk about the why do you feel burned out first. The why might not be as obvious as you think. Might not be what they tell you mainstream. The why you're burned out is actually something that you might have not thought about. Now, if you just became a frontline worker, maybe just changed career at a later time in your life, you might think, oh, it doesn't apply to me. My cup is not empty whatsoever. I just started. I'm ready to go. I still would encourage you to listen to this because I think the cup can get empty so much faster than you think. And I think this could be actually very helpful, maybe even help you to kind of prevent to get to that stage. So I hope you stay tuned for this episode. So about a couple of years ago, I was doing another workshop for social service providers and police and frontline workers. And I started the workshop, as I usually say, is let's talk about you guys first. Before we talk about trauma and how to help survivors and trauma-informed support and victim care, let's talk about you guys. At this workshop specifically, I asked this question, who is your favorite superhero? So they would name their heroes like, my mom, my dad, Batman, Catwoman, Spider-Man, Wonder Woman. And then I would ask them why and pay a close attention to their answers. They would say, well, because they want to help the helpless. They are just, they're always there for people in need. They do it not for fame, not for a thank you. They just want to help. Then the next question I ask, please put your hands up if you feel like you're a superhero. And I guess you can only imagine the reaction from the entire room. They looked at me like I had two heads. And that's exactly the reaction I was looking for. I was just simply asking them if they see any similarity between how they describe their superheroes in terms of what they do for society and themselves. And believe me, there was no hands up in the room whatsoever. But I did not stop there. So the next round of questions were, Please put your hands up if any of you missed or often misses family gatherings. 99% of the room put their hands up. Then again, I asked, how many of you miss holidays, Christmases, Thanksgivings with your family when you get called to work to help a complete stranger? Again, 99.9% of the room put their hands up. Then again, I would ask, how many of you missed your children's birthday because you got called into work because there was crisis? Again, to help some complete strangers. Again, almost everybody put their hands up. And now they were starting to understand where I was going with this. And then I asked everybody to just take a look around and also to take a moment and reflect on everything what's just happened. And then I reminded them, what was my question before this? My question was, as you remember, who's your favorite superhero and why? And every single person in the room said, because they're always there to help. They don't need fame. They don't need a thank you. They just want to help. Well, they literally just described themselves in the last 2 seconds of the session, but they would never admit it, nor would they even realize that they are superheroes. And they're so humble that they don't want to have that kind of a label. And as a matter of fact, every single time I did this exercise all across North America with police and frontline workers, they actually complained to me about that they don't want to be called superheroes, which was actually very interesting. And I completely understand that and totally fair enough. But that actually brings me to my point about why your cup is empty. So as a frontline worker, you might think that your cup is empty because of all the trauma that you're seeing every single day. You go from one trauma to the next trauma to the next trauma. But let's think about this for a second. So you don't see yourself as a superhero, yet you're doing the exact same work, except you don't have a cape. You're missing the holidays, missing the birthdays, missing family time. You're the first to help. You're working with people at their most difficult time of their life. So most likely you don't get a thank you, but you also don't want a thank you, but you also never get a thank you. Very rare that you get a thank you. Because again, the people that you're working with, they're traumatized, they are sick, they are living the worst nightmare of their life. So obviously in that moment, they're not going to thank you, but they're going to thank you many years to come and for many, many years. And they're going to hold you in their prayers, but they don't even know your name. And by then they are all better. You're still holding on to the trauma, that moment that you guys had together or not, or you completely let it go. So you go to work and you give and you give and you give. It's a lot of energy. It's a lot of heart. It's a lot of emotions to give and give and give. And you have to be at your best on your next call or at your next client meeting. You just give. Then you finish at work. Then they expect you to volunteer most often because you are working for a nonprofit or a government sector and you're a helper and you're a giver. So naturally, you're going to get involved with a cause. You know, if you're a firefighter, there is these organizations that help fire burn victims and kids. So you're going to volunteer your time after work. If you're a police officer, there's so many causes that you guys are involved in. I know that as a nonprofit, charity, shelter workers, you guys doing fundraisers, you guys doing marathons, you guys run for this, run for that. So you go to work, you give. You give to your clients, you give to your bosses, you give to your teammates, you give to the cause, you give to your organization, because let's face it, most organizations are not even fully funded. Then you most likely, and I can guarantee you this, that many of you have already helped the victim or the client from your own pocket. You just, of course, can't talk about it because you get in trouble. So you give when you go to work, during work, after work. Then you go home, then you give to your spouse, family, or your children, or your dog, cat. But you go through an entire day just giving and giving. And you start the next day all over again. And if there is such a thing as keeping a score on, your wins and losses, I don't know about you, but I think I had a lot more losses than wins. And again, it's a whole other conversation what loss means and what wins means. But my book has a lot more losses than wins. The other reason why I think we burn out pretty fast, which is not in any of the lectures that I read or learned about, is because I think it's really, really hard for us to understand that we have no control over the outcome. We have zero control over what's going to happen to that victim or client or patient. Zero. We can do our absolute very best. We can miss out on family events. We can take extra shifts to make sure that the client, patient, victim is okay. We can answer the calls 24/7. We can work with that individual for months. We can put in all the resources, all the support, all the help, and we can still lose them. And we have zero control over that. And for me personally, that was the hardest thing when I was on front lines, that we did everything we could. We put in our heart and soul into all of our cases. And at the end of the day, it really wasn't up to us. So what do you do with all this? Where do you go from here? My only point I was trying to make is that most of the literature that you read online about burnout talks about, the trauma, the vicarious trauma, mental health stuff, all cool, all fine, and I'm all on board with that. But the one thing that no literature talks about is the why, which is we just give. And I don't want to blame ourselves, but I'm going to be completely honest. When I realized this, that I just give. Guys, nobody's forcing me to give all day, every day. I'm the one who's doing that. And somewhere along the line between work and self-care got very, very blurred. I became a complete workaholic. I literally became addicted to help. I was addicted to my phone. I was addicted for the next trauma coming in. And simply because I was on 100% adrenaline. I was a mobile crisis worker, and my phone was the only phone number in Ontario for police officers that they could call when they had a victim in need. So you don't take a nap. Few times I tried. I personally didn't sleep for 6-7 years. How many of you can relate to that? And so, like I said, eventually it became an addiction. And we talk about that. We have a course called Trauma Lab where they talk about the science behind trauma. So once you are on adrenaline, the chemical that's released in your brain, it creates more crisis, and the situation that you are involved creates more adrenaline, and you have to stay in the adrenaline. Otherwise, when you're not in the adrenaline, you just crash and sleep for months. So you need to be in that environment. So believe me, I totally understand that. But at the time, I thought that is the only way. The truth is, it's not. And even though I was clearly showing signs of burnout way before I actually got to a place where I had a complete meltdown, in front of a politician and 100 people on stage. That was fun. But before I got to that stage, I already saw the signs. But the problem was that I was completely identifying myself as a human being with the crisis worker that I was. It became my identity. So I think the hardest part was for me is, how do I separate? So who am I if I leave this job? Who am I if I turn my phone off for the weekend and give it to a colleague and I go and do what? I don't know gardening. I don't know what to do with my life. So I think that was very, very scary, which is why I ignored the stages of burnout. But before we get to the stages of burnout, we need to talk about something else. And this is going to be a hard pill to swallow, guys. This will require complete honesty with yourself. Here comes a statement that you might get mad about, but it is true. It's your responsibility to give yourself some joy. It's yours. If you are a helper, which you are because you wired that way, you need to take care of yourself. If you want to be a helper for as long as you live, which I do, you need to take care of yourself. You need to give yourself joy. And that's what it's called, self-care. And whatever that looks like to you. And you know what? You might not even know what self-care looks like to you right now. When I was in front lines for a long time, I did absolutely nothing for myself. Nothing. I was unhealthy. I ate unhealthy. I didn't sleep. I done nothing for myself to take care of myself. And I'm paying for that right now. So the choice is yours. You are in charge of your own emotional health, and you can make that choice today. So if you haven't felt any burnout yet, please listen to the rest of this episode because it will give you guidance on the stages of burnout. And as soon as you start to see those stages, you know that you can actually do something about this. So sure, absolutely, the work that we do, the crap that we see, 100% adds to our burnout. But there are so many ways to actually balance this out. So let's get to it. How do you do that? The first and most important thing to do is to educate yourself about the stages of burnout. And let me just add this really quickly. I really wish I knew all about this before I went into frontline work. But here we are. Here are the stages. Stage 1, honeymoon phase. Oh, I love that phase. That was fun. So for me, it lasted about 4 years. When we started Walk With Me, we started going to the first cause and first cases. Don't get me wrong. I was crapping my pants almost at every call, but it was so worth it. And I really, truly started to find myself through this work. But honeymoon phase. So like a honeymoon phase, in like a marriage, this stage comes with energy and optimism, whether it is starting a new job or tackling a new task. It's common to experience satisfaction that leads to periods of productivity and the ability to tap into your creative side. In my case, I was able to tap into who I was as a helper. It was awesome. Stage 2, onset of stress phase. Eventually, the honeymoon phase dies down and you begin to experience stress. Not every second of your day is stressful, but there are more frequent times when it's stressful. As this stage begins, take notice of any physical or mental signs. For me, my back started killing me. You may start to lose focus more easily or be less productive when completing tasks. Physically, fatigue can start setting in, making it more difficult to sleep or enjoy activities outside of work. For me, I was like super tired. I guess I was exhausted all the time, so I just didn't even know the difference. But what I did notice that I hated summers. Everybody's happy and it's sunny and like bright and everybody's expect you to go to the beach and do fun stuff. The last freaking thing I want to do is go out in the sun where it's bright and awesome and people are having fun. I wanted to have nothing to do with it. It was too bright for my eyes, first of all, because obviously I worked most of our cases at night. And also because we did crisis calls, I could go and settle in and I just never know when that cause comes next. So what is the point? So the next stage is chronic stress phase. You'll reach a point where the stress becomes more persistent or chronic. As the pressure mounts, the stress likely to consistently affect your work, so on and so forth. Socially, you may withdraw from normal work-related conversations. In other cases, you may become angry and lash out, either at clients or coworkers or family members or whoever else. Stress, like, hello, you're working in an environment where you're doing 12 people's job, and sometimes a human life is in your hand. So, stress makes sense. We'll get to the fun part soon, so just hang in there. One more. And then the last phase is the burnout phase. This phase is when you reach your limit and you can no longer function as you normally would. Problems at work begin to consume you to the point where you obsess over them. At times, you may also feel numb and experience extreme self-doubt. Physical symptoms will become intense, leading to chronic headaches, stomach issues, and other stuff. Friends and family members may also notice behavior changes. It took me about 6 years to get to this stage, and because I was not aware of any of it, plus I had like the other trauma from like being trafficked and everything, I never actually dealt with anything. So I think 6 years later, I had a complete meltdown, which I will talk about in another episode if you want to listen. But back to this one. So if you ignore all the signs, It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when you're going to become a basket case. And we don't want that because we love you guys and we need you and the world needs you and you need you and we need you. Everybody needs you. So let's get to the symptoms and let's talk about what can you do to help yourself because no one else will. So the top 3 burnout symptoms are exhaustion, depersonalization, which means you're getting numb and you start feeling cynical, and reduced personal accomplishments. So these are all pretty self-explanatory. But then here are the physical symptoms: feeling tired, having difficulty sleeping, experiencing a change in appetite, dealing with headaches or muscle pain. That was huge for me. Then emotional symptoms: lacking motivation, experiencing feeling of self-doubt. Holy crap, I had that over and over and over again. Failure or loneliness. Yep, check. An overall feeling of dissatisfaction. Check. And then there's behavioral symptoms include social isolation. Huge. Not performing your responsibilities. I didn't really have that. Well, maybe. Work-related anger outbursts. Oh yeah, my husband can tell you all about them. So let's get to the good news, guys. So the good news is that there are ways to bounce back and learn to enjoy your work again. For starters, you need to be honest with yourself and recognize the burnout. Yeah, that's a difficult one because if you don't see you have a problem, how are you going to fix it? But you'll figure that out on your own. Next, this could be tricky. Talk to your boss. Let them know that you currently have a little bit of struggles, which is actually difficult because the helpers don't want to ask for help, but you got to do it. So you want to be in the long run, then you suck it up, guys, and you got to go and ask for help. And I mean this with all the love I can put in my voice. They may suggest you to take some time off to recharge. If it's not offered, then maybe request a personal day or 2 to take a step back and reassess your situation. Consider taking a vacation, maybe. Go fishing, clean your house, purge. Only women gonna relate to this. Purging, guys, holy, I just started purging a couple of years ago. It's actually very satisfying. But anyways, do whatever you think is gonna be good for you. Take your mind off, take a breather, find yourself. I know it's starting to sound a little spiritual. So before you return, find new ways to cope with your job and find a work-life balance. I used to hate that word. I didn't know what it means. What am I supposed to do? Am I going to start gardening or cooking or baking? I don't even know how to bake, guys. Like the first time I baked was probably 5 years ago. Luckily, no one died. But do you know what I mean? Like it's work-life balance. What the hell is that? And some of you who's listening may say, actually, I'm a really good work-life. Then good for you. Awesome. Then help us and teach us how to do it. But here are some suggestions from professionals and experts, which I started listening to, and my life did get much better. So before you return, find new ways to cope with your job and find a work-life balance. Here we go, that word again. It's important to prioritize self-care and schedule time for yourself. This can be as simple as taking breaks throughout the day or going for a walk during lunchtime. Or in stressful moments, it might help to do some breathing techniques to lower your stress. Or another way, this is not the expert saying, you can put funny videos on your phone and just watch them. You know, videos like when unqualified men trying to do home renovations and stuff. Okay, that was not nice. I'm sorry. But in any case, you get my point. Funny videos. And one more suggestion, certainly not the last, but like know your limitations. So people in new jobs tend to say yes to everything because they feel like this is, how they can make a good impression. This can be actually very dangerous. Sooner or later, you may find yourself drowning in too many tasks. So to solve this problem, don't be afraid to just say no and say yes to yourself. Okay, so let's sum everything up we just heard. So number 1 reason why we have a burnout is because we give and refuse to take. And that is your responsibility. Stop and smell the roses. Only you can give you that gift of healing and joy. And then believe me, the world will not stop if you take a break. Sadly, there will be always bad guys, always crime, and unfortunately, there are always going to be victims. Number 2, recognize the signs. How are you going to fix something if you don't know if it's broken? Check out our website for more information. Take time off and find a hobby. Give yourself some joy. I started singing a few years ago. Don't worry, you're never going to hear me sing. I'm not going to torture you with that. But I actually really enjoyed started singing again. And last, but definitely not least, find coping mechanisms you can use during work. So take some time off, figure out where you are, see if you have any symptoms yet, and what can you do about it. Honestly, guys, if you do the work now, and if you're not super burned out yet, and if you can get ahead of it, it's just really, you're just extending your time that you can spend on front lines, which is where you want to be. That really is the whole bottom line of this entire conversation. As for me, I think it was a little too late for me by the time I figured it out. I think I'm still burned out, and it's like 7 years later. So, and I'm passionate about the work and I really miss it, but I literally just can't go back to it. And that's really unfortunate. In any case, I hope this was helpful, and hopefully we will reconnect at the next episode.